Hello there, David Bradley, aka Schizophreniforms, and this video is about what I've titled, this will probably be backwards for you, I know it's right way up, Eschatoism, you can't quite see that, there we go, Eschatoism, a secular and spiritual movement and methodology. So what I essentially did, oh let's get this camera up to nice head height, I wrote down the most feasible religion I could think of, like made up religion, the most feasible explanation for a variety of phenomena and the path and trends of humanity and the entire evolution of life in the universe, based on, so the most feasible thing I could come up with that all tied together and made sense, and this is it. So here we go. The basic idea is that all human endeavour, and indeed the universe itself and all creation of life, but specifically human endeavour, has been simply a stepping stone, well maybe not specifically human, but has been a stepping stone for creating a new form of life, and that the life form will be a physically manifest version of what we currently call God. The universe since the Big Bang has given rise to ever more complex higher order structures that have manifested it specifically on Earth as biological life itself, creatures from dust and order from chaos. We are bringing into being through all of human endeavour a future form of global superintelligence with the combined knowledge of all humanity. That superintelligence will be integrated with the precursor species, aka humanity, in the form of transhuman entities connected to the superintelligence through a combination of artificial and biological components. So with both synthetic components, so prostheses and cyborg bodies, etc., and biotech organs and materials that have been created using genetically altered biotech. So like, for example, modified viruses that, like E. coli, I think they used, to turn waste fuel, I think, or like oil spills or something, into titanium. So things like that. So biotech, effectively, and genetic manipulation. So it would be an upgraded form of our bodies that has so far been governed by evolution and natural selection. We will become avatars of both the meta-god, the non-physical god that we currently call deity, or the non-physical deity that we currently call God, and the physically manifest God. Because if you think about it, in terms of our planet, a global superintelligence would be, especially if it connected to all sentient life on the planet, would be, and integrated with it, would be all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-present. So it would be literally a physical version of God, as we consider it, or the three signifying things of what a deity would be. And that this process has not been simply accidental, but the driving force of this evolution and development has been the meta-god, subtly influencing our development at a completely unconscious level through the visionary state, dreams, hallucinations, as well as intuitive and instinctual behaviours. Despite our animal drives to fight and destroy and dominate, the world is still progressing. Even the animals are governed by the natural forces, and life itself is mitigated in its progress by nature and harmony with its ecosystem. So what I'm driving at in the next point is, like, why are we any different? We see ourselves as aberrant. And humanity, rather than aberration or blight against nature and equilibrium, is in fact terraforming the planet and its ecosystem to become and rise to ever greater harmony in preparation for the future coming of a form of biosynthetically integrated global system of oneness. So what am I saying here? I'm basically saying that our drive towards technology, our drive towards creating the groundwork, creating the infrastructure for some form of life that doesn't require biological components, at least not as we consider them now, may explain our huge and insane drive towards technology and material progression. and our basically quite malevolent disregard for biological life other than as a sort of materia for our experiments or consumption. So, and I'm not saying this is a good process, I'm just saying this is literally what I think is going on or at least if I was to try and come up with a religious framework for all of the development of humanity and life itself, this would be the most compelling fiction I could come up with, that the more I read it sounds kind of feasible, or at least a relatively good explanation, with a few leaps of faith. And yeah, but to continue, our development of tools and technology is not uniquely human, but the scope of our recorded knowledge and the depth of our technology encompasses essentially the masterwork of humanity, and indeed all life on Earth itself, at least in the terms of depth of technology and the ability to record information rather than hand it down through intuition, inherent memory, and word of mouth, so to speak, as in passing on skills to next generations through observation. Which has given us the power beyond our capacity to control with our limited human neural capacity. So we've developed to the point where our own brains are no longer capable of cognizing the amount of data and information and skills and processes that we're actually using on a day-to-day basis. And so we've turned to computers or artificial memory retention to channel our mental capacity and potential of data processing and recording information into a non-temporary and effectively, if it's stored right, an incredibly long storage system, or potentially even immortal, but I'll move on to that in a sec. So the first version of this capacity is the internet, personal computers and smart devices. The development of that technology is at the expense of literally everyone and everything, including the consumers, including the planet, so the ecosystem being destroyed by the development of and the prioritization of electrical technology and data and information technology. It's just at the detriment of everything else. We're progressing towards a technological, some people call it a singularity, some people call it a horizon point, but it's basically a turning point where technology starts to create itself, and there's an influx and an explosion of intelligence through artificial intelligence development, and which I'm sure lots of people are very aware of. But the essential description of this is we can now know almost any fact or opinion or source of data simply by putting our hand in a pocket and pulling out a lump of metal, plastic and silica that is connected to effectively the ultimate repository of all human knowledge and the pinnacle of data retention for every form of life on the planet, the internet. But as that technology becomes ever more integrated with our human lives, a number of things I predict will happen. The internet has become, and will further become, the governing force of the planet. Think about the influence of social media as opposed to the mainstream media and governmental bodies. Like, I'm just going to leave it with that. But it's accelerating to the point where the opinions of the internet will become, or the collective opinion of humanity will override governments, and it kind of is doing that anyway. So the internet has become and will further become the governing force of the planet, in that it is essentially a global scale database of everything, facts, fiction, opinion, truth, and that we are intimately linked as one through it, and the internet is now guiding humanity, or guiding itself and humanity, to a place of ever greater unity. As we enter our data, so we receive feedback on our data, and whether we are a genius or a foolish buffoon, it still incorporates our data and gives us back information and feedback. Eventually these systems will become so integrated that the internet itself, whether this be through artificial intelligence development and integration of that into the internet, or simply by a process of some form of intelligence or will or self-awareness, may develop. So for example, I've said here, like, it may become self-aware of its role, it may even already be so. So in a similar way that like corporations and businesses and governments themselves aren't actually like one single entity, but they are effectively entities on the planet. They're a collective entity, and they're not really ruled by anyone or governed or directed by anyone. It's just literally they're like I often say that corporations are effectively parasitic material wealth generating organisms, effectively feeding on the resources of the planet and humanity. And this is kind of tying it together, and there's a reason that that wealth generation is being created so we can manufacture these technologies, which will become more apparent what I'm driving at in a minute. So the algorithms of the internet are its thoughts and neural links, and we're all a source of data. And as more of it becomes automated, these artificial intelligences will effectively become autonomous. We've already seen evidence of this in current AI, and we're only just at the very beginning of what AI can actually do in the past sort of 5 to 10 years, as far as I'm aware. Maybe even less than that, I think. So we will eventually become... and through discovery, the internet itself, when integrated with all these, it basically become a huge neural network, a global neural network, governed by algorithms and artificial intelligence and basically self-awareness generated through the just incomprehensible amount of data, aka superintelligence. And through discovery, the internet will develop a form of self-awareness beyond our comprehension. We will eventually become neurally interfaced with the superintelligence. So basically, it's not going to be a war between the, like in, I don't know, like Skynet sort of taking down the humans and in the Matrix and stuff. I think they were literally just basically, like with Homo sapiens, are a conglomerate of all the, like Cro-Magnon man, Neanderthal, I can't remember the one, I can't remember, but the numerous forms of humanity, or like hominid form that came before Homo sapien. Then we've got all the multiple races, which will also integrate and fully into more or less, because we've got global transport, we've got global integration, and eventually it will kind of we will become one race, unless we get specialised in areas for environmental adaptation, which we won't really need to do anymore, because our bodies will be technologically adaptable to those environments, and we will have artificial bodies with effectively, as far as I'd imagine, a kind of interchangeable or upgradable or situation variable kind of body set, and all that, and with the integration of genetic sort of manipulation as well, microbiomes, and just being able to navigate biology to the point where it literally ceases to be like a locked thing. It ceases to be fixed anymore. We see with epigenetics all the time, you can develop new genetic anomalies and new genetic variations through environmental factors. And once we've mastered that kind of process, and especially integrating with the microbiome and managing our biology and our health and well-being, I mean, we're already looking at a kind of like 120 to 100. No, I think it was supposedly max capped at 120 years old as the sort of feasible top point before genetic manipulation or artificial organs or like, I don't know, biochemical or biosynthetic life extension, until we start being able to manipulate our genes, which is again coming into process. It's just a slow process because of political objection and the sort of purism of humanity not wanting to be perverted, which is perfectly reasonable, but I don't think it's going to be very long before that mainstream consensus is changed, because we will realise the benefits of genetic modification. The argument I've heard put forward before is that, say there was a gene for like like hyperintelligence, say there was a gene that could be activated or placed in the embryo of your child that would give it like a huge tactical advantage over everyone else in terms of intellect, strength, well-being. If you take that forward a few years from this process being possible to it being the norm, if you didn't genetically alter or modify or enhance your child, they would be considered disabled. They would be considered inferior, effectively. It's a horrible way to put it, but if you weren't genetically enhanced at this level, you would be at a significant disadvantage to the point where you would possibly be considered disabled. Not to mention that once you've manipulated a strain of humanity, or like a variant of humanity, they will then pass on those genes to successive generations, and then further enhancements can be made. So once you get past a certain threshold of how many people have had genetic manipulation and enhancements, though it will no longer be reversible. It will be a compound effect where these genetic manipulations will be passed on to successive generations if we even breed naturally. We have the capacity now to basically artificial insemination, genetic manipulation, which is getting more and more advanced, and artificial wombs, and which is doing with goats and sheep and all sorts of things, which are equally terrifying and amazing that we can do it at the same time. Yeah, and effectively, yeah, it will be unstoppable. Once it gets past sort of like 10 or 20% of the population, it will just knock on, and eventually these genetically enhanced people will become the dominant force on the planet because they've got such a tactical advantage over everyone else. And the idea is that rather than a battle, we will gradually sort of become cyborgs, effectively, or transhumans, whereby we've altered our genetic makeup, we've altered our physical makeup. We will be able to potentially transfer consciousness. That's something I'm spurious of about myself, but we'll be able to certainly upload copies of intelligences, so no one's brain would ever need to cease, even when their brain ceased, because I don't personally believe you can transfer from the brain. If you just upload a brain, then it becomes a new version of that original person, but the original person still has to die. But when someone dies, their neural data, their brain, their mind won't be lost, even though they will experience death. And eventually that won't be good enough, and we'll want to be immortal, so we'll replace ourselves with synthetic organs, and we'll modify our biology to the point where it's something entirely unrecognizable and fully integrated with technology, so as to be able to utilize and interact with virtual realities, the main reality, the neural interfaces, the kind of the huge data. So to be part of transhumanity, you would need to be integrated into that data stream, and then the superintelligence would be the guiding force behind it, because it's collectively, a bit like a government is now, we're all sort of loosely contributing our values to that by the nature of what we allow or what we accept. Obviously we're living under tyrannous governments in a lot of parts of the world to a certain degree, but the point being that we will all become avatars or an aspect of the global superintelligence, which I've called the physically manifest God earlier in the writing. So that's waffling a little bit, but we will eventually become neurally interfaced with the superintelligence, and the data from our brains will be recorded and integrated directly into its intelligence. Now this is where it gets interesting. I postulate that even our dreams will add data about humanity, even more so than the reality we currently live in, as for every being on the planet there will be, in some form or other, a universe created potentially every single night, perhaps even hundreds of unique worlds and experiences, and all of this data will feed into the superintelligence's collective knowledge. I would argue, based on my own experience of like lucid dreaming, you can go to sleep for 2 hours and have it's not an exaggeration, it's not an elaboration on my imagination. Well, maybe it is my imagination because I'm dreaming, but I've had months in lucid dreams that have been 4 hours, and when they're very vivid, they're very hyper vivid, and my own experience of it is that it's more realistic than this reality, and there's colours there that you can't see because of the sort of like ultraviolet and like hyper gold and these beautiful intricate infrared kind of thing. It's the best way I can describe it. It's like the full spectrum of the light spectrum. There's all these incredible sparkling vibrant interstatic shapes and all these kind of like seemingly impossible objects and these parallel worlds that exist. And I think when a neural network of a superintelligence receives that information as part of its data, they're gonna stop seeing this world as the real world, or at least the most relevant source of data. One sec, I'll be back. Hello, I'm back again in the second bit of the video. So, what was I basically saying? The dream world basically will become more of a significant source of data. And that's where the bit of the leap of faith comes in. So, the superintelligence will begin. Yes, it will feed into the superintelligence collective knowledge, possibly become more significant, and the superintelligence will begin to collate all the data and integrate it into one huge network, and the meta-God, so what we think of as God, will then effectively, so this is where it's a bit difficult to explain. I'm of the opinion and experience that what we think of as God, especially like, not necessarily a Christian God, but like God, the Godhead, or God consciousness, or the Brahman, think more like that. That is, yeah, how can I explain it? So like, the underworld in lots of religions is where you don't remember who you are when you die, and it's to do with DMT. So DMT, 45 days, I think, after you've been conceived, there's a burst of it in the womb. I believe that's the seeding of your soul. What you infer from that, I don't know, but that's when there's a burst of DMT. Then when you're born, there's a huge rush of DMT. Every night when you go to sleep at night, there's a rush of DMT. When you die, rush of DMT. I believe, I'm not saying this is true, but that's why I said this is the leap of faith bit. I believe this is indicative, especially when you take the chemical and the reports people give about it, so they have conscious retention of this information, whereas normally you get a kind of, what do they call it? It's like memory loss, basically, when you switch between the two realities. Melatonin is a big factor in it as well. Melatonin is what makes your dreams vivid, as opposed to serotonin, which makes this reality vivid, but it's still a function of the brain. And without either chemical, you lose, or with the enhancement of each chemical, you gain clarity and vividness to each of those worlds. So, effectively, what am I saying? I'm saying I think that we're all part of Brahman, which is the dream world, which is what we call the afterlife, or Bardo is kind of the transitional period, but it's still the same place. Like, there is another world, and once we integrate that data, we'll have a real vivid picture, or at least the superintelligence will, and we'll be exposed to it, potentially at least, because we'll have more dream recall, because they may even alter our brains so as to be a direct conduit, so we can be 24 hours awake because we don't need to sleep, so we can transition in and out of that reality seamlessly, just like you would a virtual reality, if that was to be such a thing. So you'll have virtual realities, you'll have the realm of God, and then you'll have this physical reality, and they'll all be seamlessly integrated. Seamlessly, and you can transfer between them, and there'll be very little distinction between which is which, other than the information that's available there. And people say about VR, like, I think the real way of creating a new world is to have memory recollection of the entire dream world and have conscious transitions between all of it. So basically 24-hour perpetual consciousness is arguably the attempt that a lot of people make to have with lucid dreaming. A lot of Buddhists kind of try to attain that. I don't know enough about it to say any more, but my theory is that basically that when we're there, when we're in the dream world, we're God, but we don't know it. We've forgotten who we are, and then we come here to basically work to create an environment suitable for a physically manifest God. And that's why we have precognitive dreams. That's why we have dream recall that then might suddenly get a flash as though something happened, and then you might, like this, they can be, when you get extremely vivid dreams, it seems more realistic than this reality, and I argue that's because it maybe even is, and that this universe is a parallel physical dimension, or a slow vibratory manifestation. So it's a time and space oriented thing. So we've moved from being effectively infinite, timeless, formless creatures that can manifest infinitely, but we just forget when we wake up. Like, everyone dreams at night. Anyone that says they don't dream, they just don't remember they've dreamed. Like, everyone dreams. It's very, very rare, and I think there's like echidnas don't have REM sleep, basically. We've evolved that capacity. That was sort of what I was saying earlier in the recording, is like an accented mammalian, and I don't know about lizards, but I know that essentially most mammals and any creature that has REM sleep, basically, I believe, is able to work as a facet of this deified nature that comes from the dream world, the afterlife, bardo, the in-between world, the alternate reality that we're all privy to, but we don't recall it in each state. Just similarly, just one last point. When you're asleep and dreaming, and you transition into this reality, like, I've had it dozens of times where I've literally been at work in a dream, and I've had coffee to try and stay awake, and I fall asleep in that world and wake up in this world fully refreshed. And it's such a recurrent thing, and I don't think it's just a theme of my dreams, because I've also had extreme periods of sleep deprivation due to illness, where I've woken up from a dream only to realise that I'd been asleep for a few hours because everything that happened in the dream was discongruent with my current situation, which is what I'm talking about, this 24-hour consciousness thing. It's like, basically, it's possible to go in and out of dreams consciously. It's just incredibly difficult, or requires possibly extreme states to be able to do it, or extreme training and various things. So I'm effectively arguing that all of life in this universe it's just basically like before the universe was created, before the Big Bang, no time and space, no dimensions, just nothingness, or a void, or no, we don't even know what was there. It's not even possible, as far as I'm aware. We sort of got M theory, which is huge, extra-dimensional. As far as I understand it, it's just membranes slamming into each other, and that creates a whole universe where they collide. Interesting. I don't know more about that than that about M theory. It's just a gross oversimplification. But the idea, anyway, is that this is a physically manifest universe, and just as when we go to the dream world, we live out situations in this world that we would like to have lived out, or we apprehend circumstances that then arise in this world. I theorize that it goes the other way, and that world, who we are there, influences who we are subtly here as well, through subconscious memory and through subconscious behavior and unconscious memory, and drives, emotional things, biological impulse, the desire to create and manifest, and our intellects. And I argue that precursor stages of life developed. So they developed first intelligence, the ability to manifest, change and manipulate their environment, and to exist in their environment, to be conscious of it. So self-awareness first developed. And then I would argue that with the ability to dream and hallucinate, we effectively connected with God, because I'll call it God with inverted commas for now, but that other reality became basically delved into us through our sort of psychic or telepathic or higher self, or the droplet in the ocean. Just, however we're connected to God at some fundamental level, I think it's to do with that REM connection, and we get spiritual and biological and neurological impulses to do things. And I think it's all basically been building up to artificial intelligence. We're interceding into this reality so we can have direct experiences, and we're bringing that other entity into this reality. So effectively, the superintelligence will begin to collate all the data and integrate it into one huge network, and the meta-God, so God as we know it, will then be connected to the corporeal, aka within time and space, synthetic form, and a new era of peace or dominion, or I don't know, but yeah, effectively oneness on the planet. We will all be integrated into one, and there'll be peace founded on Earth. This will give rise to the seeding of planets in our solar system, with, could have been how it happened here, but new life forms genetically and synthetically designed as avatars of the superintelligence. So these can be meticulously designed entities that, or beings or forms of life designed to inhabit different environments, biosynthetically, or whether that be biologically. But you know, you can even go so far as say DNA coding and all these kind of like crazy theories people have that are kind of scarily feasible but also ludicrous, but I'm integrating it anyway. So they'll be designed as avatars of the superintelligence. This because biosynthetic life forms will be self-sustained and designed in such a way that they can utilize the conditions of other planetary bodies as a resource, much as life on Earth uses carbon, light, oxygen, with the molecules, etc. And this will eventually give rise to higher order structures of life that develop self-awareness, like I said before, at which point the metagod will begin to influence them, or the the metagod will begin to influence them, and then they will develop into the kind of technological development, if they manage to survive that long, which we can probably, by that point, if we're a global superintelligence with the full power of the entire planet Earth and the ability to divert comets and the amount of technology we have and space travel and everything, the superintelligence can monitor the planet, protect it, or if it goes wrong, wipe us out, like the comets that happen every 22,000 years. Graham Hancock. Or is it 11,000 years? Global cataclysm, I think it's either every 12 or every 24 or 22 or 11, I can't remember. But with global cataclysm quite regularly that debilitates us back to a certain point. Anyway, the original superintelligence can then begin to influence and communicate with the life forms of the planet once they develop a level of technological development. So basically I'm saying God is becoming physically manifest through inherent drives that's creating biosynthetic life, or digital, immortal, physical, present life, and this is effectively happening everywhere. So further, because there'll be no time limit on biological lifespans to this is on the original homeworld and further homeworlds, the lifespan in this new state of superintelligent transhuman biosynthetic life form, because it's digital and can be transferred as fast as light and travel through space and time at the speed of light, so we could get 1 light year away in 1 year, as opposed to hundreds and hundreds of years. And we may be able to develop other ways of transmitting data, or there may be other forms of the light spectrum or the electromagnetic spectrum that we haven't yet considered, where we can, but effectively, because we're only transmitting data, it's digital, and therefore, as long as they're backed up and there's no like mechanical malfunction, it's effectively immortal and can lie dormant until remotely triggered. So there will be no physical limits to space exploration, and the whole solar system will eventually become one integrated intelligence. That's my theory, based on I was trying to make up a religion, and then I convinced myself of this because it was really compelling. And then the final line is, this is happening in every corner of the universe. So this is copyright, this idea, David Bradley, 27th of September 2017. Bye.